Hey Street Fighter Assassin's Fist fans, this is the episode 2 Q&A video for this week. Christian Howard was going to do it, but he's busy this week, so hopefully he will do episode 3 for you, and I'm hoping Mike Mo will do episode 4. Will give me a break. So let's jump right in. I just want to make a note to say that aside from these Q&A videos, we're going to also do, when we've gone through all the apps, we're going to do character by character Q&A, because there are so many personal questions which I know you guys want to ask various actors. So questions like, what did it personally feel like to do the Tatsumaki or something? For Ken, for example, I can give you the perspective from the director and a choreographer and, you know, seeing it, but to get it from the horse's mouth, you're going to have to hear it from Chris, or likewise from Mike about moves he did, or from Akira. So after all of this, there will be detailed Q&A videos with each of the actors, so you can ask them specific questions about their own experiences of bringing their characters to life narratively and physically in the series. So let's jump straight into it. So first question from Mike Canton. It seems that in this fight, Ken is willing to go places Ryu is not. Ryu is technically won this match, but refused to hit a downed opponent. Ryu hesitated, as Gokan says. Ryu is pure, it seems. He loves his brother. Does it frustrate you to see some younger fans complain about Ken being the stronger of the two, when the evidence in your film points to the contrary? Psychologically, Ken is stronger, healthier, I think. Both have abandonment issues. Okay, some good, interesting insight and point of view you've got there, Mike. We tried to make Assassin's Fist layered, you know, rather than just kind of making it obvious and on the nose. So you can read into situations what you want. On face value, you may think, oh, Ken's the stronger, he's always beating Ryu, why have you made Ryu weak? But as you said, if you look a little closer, you'll see that Ryu often achieves far more results with far fewer techniques. Therefore, he's more efficient, you know. And as Bruce Lee always says in Jeet Kune Do, economy of motion is what you're seeking. So yeah, it can be annoying that people maybe aren't picking up on some of the subtle details that are put in there. As I said, when Ryu does his collar breaker on Ken, and Ken's down, he's almost like helpless, panting, waiting for Ryu to follow up, and Ryu doesn't. He just kind of breathes and composes himself. And that frustrates Ken. That frustrates Ken's ego, which is why Ken gets up and pushes Ryu and is like, come on, Ryu, you know, because he's being embarrassed. He knows Ryu is going easy on him, and that pisses Ken off, and that drives Ken to work harder. So so there you have it. There'll be more questions asked later that will kind of tie into this point, so we'll get to them later. Second question from Joey Geneva. Good name. We share the same first name, which means he must be a wonderful person. So you put fantastic development of Hado, an explanation, and amazing special effects. The Chinese proverb is not one I like, and by that he means there are many paths to the top of the mountain, but the view is always the same. It doesn't make sense, since Mu no Hado is not Satsui No Hado, and they lead to very different mountaintops, but I guess it can make sense in one way. Also, how many notebooks did Goki have? He also asked about Christian's Tatsumaki, which I will come to a bit later, because a lot of people have asked about Chris's now legendary Tatsumaki. So let's address the Chinese proverb thing. I think you should like it because it's right. So what do we mean by that? And this gives me a good chance to talk about the difference between Mu no Hado and Satsui No Hado. It is very complex, and this is why you guys should buy the eventual production design book that we're planning on making, because we're going to really go into detail about all the kind of elemental forces you see in Assassin's Fist. Original Satsui No Hado, as taught in Ansatsuken. In traditional Ansatsuken, only Satsui No Hado exists. That is the only way you can generate and manifest Hado. It's as simple as that. So Satsui No Hado translates literally as, you know, the wave of murderous intent. And it is a term that is almost used in martial arts. It's kind of like, if you can get that feeling, if the hair's standing up on the back of your neck and you look around and there's someone staring at you with, you know, a not particularly friendly expression, you could say you are feeling that person's Satsui No Hado. You're feeling that person's negative or destructive or murderous intention. And we always sometimes feel we have a sixth sense, or you can tell when someone's staring at you, as if you can feel it. You could describe that as being you're sensing someone's Satsui No Hado. So essentially, in traditional Ansatsuken, you focus yourself into a state of murderous intent so much and for so long that your ki, which is traveling around your body, will start to discharge into either your fist, if that's what you're thinking of striking the object with, or your foot. So Satsui No Hado still makes you manifest your own ki. It's not like using Satsui No Hado instantly means you're drawing on Dark Hado. No. To tap into Dark Hado requires a complete mastery of Satsui No Hado, almost mythical levels, where you can draw this almost dark ki from a dark dimension, you know? So Muno Hado does the same thing. You're still channeling your own ki. It's merely, rather than focusing on very dark, murderous thoughts, you're completely getting to a meditative state of nothingness, where you can only feel, the only sensation you're aware of is the flow of your ki. And at that point, you can then surge the ki or manipulate it into Hado. So essentially, Satsui No Hado and Muno Hado do result in the same end product, Hado. The only difference is Satsui No Hado at a high level of mastery allows you to tap into Dark Hado, and those are all the moves that have the Mets kind of prefix to it. Conversely, Muno Hado, the power of nothingness, allows you to tap into Shinku, which is almost the opposite of Dark Hado. Shinku is like drawing pure energy from the source of creation of the universe from another realm. So if you look at the yin-yang symbol, imagine the dark side is of the realm of Dark Hado, the white side is the realm of Mu, or nothingness, or where creation occurs, and that line in the middle is where we vibrate, is where our plane or universe vibrates. So super high exponents of either Muno Hado or Dark Hado can kind of draw ki from these two different realms. So hopefully now that Chinese proverb makes sense to you. Question number 3. Oh, you also asked, how many notebooks did Goki have? Okay, so the notebook that Ken finds is one of Goki's. Goki had several of those little blue books that he had been using to transcribe the scrolls, the densho. So if you notice, when Goki's furiously packing his bags when he's been banished and Sayaka comes into the room and interrupts him, he's meanwhile stuffing those books into his bag and kind of stops in his tracks as she comes in. So he left one in there, which is one that Ken finds. Go back and rewatch it and you will see that that makes sense. We were so pushed for time. Originally I did want an insert shot of Goki dropping or leaving one of the books, and then Ken specifically finding it, but sometimes with the restrictions and, you know, compromise you have to make when filming, some things slip through the gaps. Question 3. Shirley E. Susilo. I hope this question hasn't been asked before. I love how comedic moments were also included in the series. One of my favourite moments in the beginning of episode 2 is when Gokan sensei yelled at Ryu and Ken to wake them up from their sleep. Who came up with that idea and how did that idea manifest? My life will be complete if this gets answered in your next Q&A video. Thank you, and I love you guys. You used emotional blackmail to get me to answer your question, and it worked. I think early on I wanted Gokan, when writing Gokan's character, I wanted him to have a slightly wicked sense of humour. Several senseis and teachers I've had growing up have had a similar thing. I think as a teacher myself of martial arts, I do at times. And that's real human beings. You know, too many of these films, the masters are these like saints with no freaking personality. It's like the whole thing with Assassin's Fist is these are real human beings that have flaws, they have weird idiosyncrasies. Yeah, there you have it. So I just thought it would be funny to completely break the mold and keep you on your toes with him waking them up and being quite nasty. That scene was originally longer, actually. It was longer, but then we condensed it. Next question. From one of our regulars on the board, Invince Messots. He put, on a candid note, I asked 2 questions during Joey's first AMA before the show was released. One was about Gokan. Joey answered that question. The other was about Gen. I guess that question did not get answered because I would assume it would have spoiled this wonderful Easter egg. Indeed. Okay, so his question is... I'll paraphrase because it's a long-ass question he's asked. That Gen does a form of Ansatsuken. So he's basically talking about, you know, the traditional Ansatsuken line has been split into almost 2 families, the Japanese side and the Chinese side. Will we ever explore the connections and the history between the two? It's a good, deep, sort of mythological question, and I'll try and address that a bit now. As any of you kind of martial arts historians will know, all martial arts, or all Far Eastern martial arts for the most part, came from China. And they would have originally come from India, which gives you a nice, you know, that the Buddhist monk Bodhidharma spread Buddhism to China from India. And a lot of the monks, the new sort of Buddhist monks in China, found all these long hours of meditation were making their bodies very stiff and wasting away. So when Bodhidharma returned, he taught them a whole range of exercises and stances based on the various sort of animal movements. And that later formed the foundation of the different animal styles of Shaolin Kung Fu. And then eventually that spread to, you know, forms of Kung Fu spread to Japan, and then that was changed into its own, you know, Japanese forms. I won't go into detail here, but, you know, do your own reading up about it. So it would be cool to suggest that there would have been the Ansatsuken style in its embryonic form would have begun in China, and at some point it split off and was brought to Japan, and then you still had a Chinese... I mean, look, Assassin's Fist, Ansatsuken, is just a general term for a killing art. It just translates as Assassin's Fist or Assassination Fist. So you could say ninjutsu, or the ninja Aiga and Koga ninja clans in ancient Japan did a form of Ansatsuken because they were there to kill. If they were going to assassinate someone, they weren't there to just knock them out. They were there to end their life. So you could say that some forms of ninjutsu were an Ansatsuken of sorts. What would be cool to do, Sheng Long, or Sheng Long, that would be a closer pronunciation, is literally just the Chinese pronunciation of the kanji or characters for rising dragon, Long being dragon. Same as Shoryu. So that was originally some translation mistake Capcom did in the game, where it's like, in order to stand a chance, you must defeat Sheng Long, and people are like, who the fuck Sheng Long? Is he Ryu's master? Is he some character? But wouldn't it be cool if we worked out that Sheng Long was a prolific Chinese practitioner or master of Ansatsuken, still in China, and he invented the Rising Dragon, he invented the Shoryuken, and he brought it over to Japan back in feudal times. He came over and maybe joined another dojo there, a ninja dojo or some form of ninjutsu dojo, and kind of then the Japanese form of Ansatsuken really began to crystallize from that point onwards. But hey, you know, I'm not going to give away too many secrets, but that would be, if I was going to go back in time and cover that, that would be kind of the way we would do it. Question number 5, Bruce Brown. How long and what was the process that went into improving the Hadoken from Legacy to Assassin's Fist? In the latter, we can actually see how the energy is gathered, increased, shaped, and finally thrown. Even when Ken and Ryu become more proficient and generate the Hado faster, you can still see, if you watch closely, the stages that the Hadoken goes through before being thrown. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you feel it can possibly be improved upon? Good question. I'm glad you appreciate the Hado and the detail that goes into it. When you guys eventually get the DVD Blu-ray of this, you're going to see it in even better detail. There is so, with the right contrast settings, there is so much detail and design that has gone into all the stages of the Hadoken. There was a long, detailed briefing process which I had to give. So Cinemotion is the Bulgarian visual effects house that did all of our visual effects and post, and the grade was done there, and they did a great job. Hats off to you, Victor, for your hard work on there. So what I described, because you want to visually see, you want the Hadoken to make sense. A lot of people are like, oh, why haven't you put fucking lightning in, like Street Fighter 2, the animated movie? Believe me, that would look naff. You don't believe me, go and do your own Hadoken with just barbs of lightning coming out of it. Remember, within the Street Fighter world, there are several forms of Hado, and Denjin Hadoken, like Gokan can do in Street Fighter 4, is an electrical form of Hado. So if you have barbs of lightning flying out of normal Hado, how then do you show the Denjin Hadoken, right? So let's think theory-wise. What is happening with the Hadoken? You're channeling your ki, whether that's through Muno Hado or Satsui No Hado. Eventually the ki is almost in an invisible form starting to discharge between these two conductors, your hands. And so you first see that almost blue plasma sort of vapor thing start forming. And then a singularity forms. So this is much like how a nuclear fusion reaction or the Big Bang or any of these big energy systems ignite. A singularity, a point will form, a consolidated point where suddenly a self-sustaining reaction begins. So you see the blue vapor cloud, you see that singularity blip of very hot white looking light blip to life. That then, as more Hado gets, or ki gets consolidated into that singularity, like a nuclear fusion reaction, it expands and grows and starts kicking off more energy. And which is why you see their hands expand. And so it expands, and the tough part is for them to contain that reaction and make it actually stable. So that's whenever you see a Hadoken grow, they do it, the singularity forms, their hands go apart, and then there's a look of strain on their face as they compress. Once they compress it, the Hadoken is now stable, and when you throw it, it's going to stay stable in flight for quite some time. If you're unable to properly recompress it when you throw it, it will just break apart. Hence, Ken's Hadoken that he does in episode 6 that only travels a couple of meters and then dissipates. That's because he hasn't learnt to recompress and contain the energy properly. It's something that Ryu takes to a lot more naturally. So all those details, now I've described that, have a look artistically at the way the Hadokens are presented, and you'll hopefully see all of those stages. So yeah, you also asked Bruce Brown, who asked the Hadoken question, about the book. And the ringing, the sound you hear, we created, as part of the sound design, I wanted a sound that represented Satsui No Hado, so it's a combination of that very high-pitched tinnitus sound with a very low, almost subsonic sound, that if you're watching this through a system with a subwoofer or something, you'll really feel this kind of low vibration as well as this high-pitched, uncomfortable tingle. I wanted it to be uncomfortable because Satsui No Hado is meant to be quite an unpleasant, nasty thing. So apologies to you guys that found that unpleasant to listen to. But what can you do? It's in there for a reason. At least you feel it. But listen to it through a good sound system because it really does. It really does pay off, you know. So next question from the Molander Show. I watched your hour-long review and dissection of the series. It was interesting. Thanks for your interest. So you've got a few quick questions that I'll fire through. How long did it take to build the 2 dojos? About 5 weeks. What materials did you use? Cheese and chocolate. No, wood mainly. Did you use ceremonial kimono on his alternate outfit from the Street Fighter 4 DLC? We didn't purposefully. I think in the back of our minds we knew there was a version of his you know, costume similar, but we wanted them in traditional kimono with a hakama, and to have a white one for Ryu and a red sort of maroon one for Ken, to still kind of represent their essence colours. Is Ken's hairstyle in that ceremonial garb an homage to anything? I just think we wanted a cool samurai style hair cut, because Ken has got this real long hair, which I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's almost an homage to Goken's hair. It's like Ken rebelling against his dad. I think when Ken arrives at the dojo, he's got hair more like Street Fighter 2 Ken, more like his dad's hair kind of is when he drops him off. But I think the resentment of his father, Ken latches onto Gokan slightly as another father figure to emulate, and thus grows his hair long to almost emulate and copy Gokan. And by the end, he cuts it and he looks more like his dad again, type thing. So yeah, the hair in the ceremonial garb, he's got this great long hair, let's do a cool, very traditional samurai half-tie kind of look. Next question, Ben Semi. What's up, Ansatsuken Masters? The fight in the dojo seemed a little claustrophobic. Was it a struggle for Mike and Christian to pull off some of the moves without fear of smashing up the recording equipment? Also, what do the drawings of the demons on the door behind Gokan represent? The dojo's bigger than you think. I mean, it must be a good 7 meters long at least in there, and maybe 3-4 meters wide. So there wasn't really a risk of smashing into stuff. I mean, Ken's roll, you can see, he rolls out the way of Ryu's big Street Fighter 3 sidekick and comes up pretty close to the wall. And when he gets tomenaged by Ryu, he almost rolls into the cabinet, which is cool though. You want a bit of, in fights, a bit of kind of environment interaction to make it feel real and dangerous. Those demon things drawn on the doors, they're called Nyo, and they are traditionally sort of warrior demons that are used to ward off evil spirits outside Buddhist temples, and they always have, you know, positions like this, you know, or like that, or like this, you know, in kind of that posture. And that's where clearly Akuma's stance and Gokan's stance were based from. So they're much like gargoyles in a Christian church, for example. They serve the same purpose, but they're kind of warrior demons, and they're called Nyo. And I believe that the creators of Street Fighter would have originally based the kind of hand positions and the move positions that Goki and Gokan have on these Nyo. So we thought, let's incorporate them. Right, Lord Pinder, love the series, been a follower ever since Legacy. So you talk about the power of nothingness. You thought it was only an advanced state being attainable by the old masters, but you envision it as an alternative to Satsui No Hado. I kind of already explained that to you, the difference earlier, so yeah, I hope that answers your question. Next question, Max Pimentel. Was the Warrior's Pilgrimage a thing that happened in real life, or was that a concept you guys created? No, the Musha Shugyo is a real concept. You only need to read Miyamoto Musashi's book, The Book of Five Rings, and that essentially details his warrior's pilgrimage, where he reaches enlightenment at the end and stops fighting altogether and just lives in a cave and paints and writes for the rest of his life. So you are seeking enlightenment through combat. You're seeking answers and growth and development through dueling to the death at times. Also a great book. Having done Bujinkan Ninjutsu under Hatsumi Sensei, his master Takamatsu Sensei was dubbed almost the last living ninja, and his book. There is a book that Masaki Hatsumi has written that details some writings from Takamatsu, and it talks about some of his warrior's pilgrimage and some of the various opponents he faced during his time around Asia. So if you're interested in Mushishugyos, do your research and read some of those books. Okay, one of the last questions from Walter Nakahara. If Ken had not chosen the middle dummy but the left or right, what would Gokan have done? Well, he would have merely Hadokened whichever dummy Ken had chosen. The joke, I understand some of the humour may go over some of your guys' heads when Gokan says, I offer you a reward, pick one of the 3 training dummies over there. It's almost like Ken's thinking, oh, for fuck's sakes, we're not doing more training, are we? Is he now going to make me go over there and start doing drills? And that's why he's reluctant. And then Gokan, really deep down, Gokan was like, I'm going to show you something cool. But he says pick one, and whichever one Ken picked, Gokan would have taken aim and Hadokened it. So that rounds up the questions. I'll sign off by saying there's been a lot of questions about Chris's Tatsumaki, which was a thing of beauty. I think we did 2 takes on that, and I think the first take was the one. We did a second one for safety, for the hell of it, but he really pulled it out the bag. I mean, any of you guys who do Taekwondo or do Capoeira or do tricking know that most cheat 720s or 540 hooks, 540 crescents, most trickers wind up from left to right or from right to left and do it. But it's much harder moving forwards, where you've got to step forwards and wind up and travel forwards rather than from side to side. The execution of it is a bit more almost like a capoeira armada double, because you're staying in a crescented foot position. You're not popping and sort of rechambering in a taekwondo style. The leg's got to stay out the whole time. And we had practiced it a bit before at gymnastics, but it was one of those do or die moments. We were running out of time, literally. We had a couple of minutes left, and it was like, Chris, now's your time. You know, now's your time. And Chris is one of those people that is naturally very gifted physically, and when it counts most, Chris can pull stuff out the bag, and he's pretty fearless as well. So it was really great that what you're seeing was not some long rehearsed, long practiced thing. It was you know, kind of let's just do it, and he did it. And I'm sure on a later video he can talk to you much more in detail about how it felt and what was going through his mind, and etc. about the move. As for wired Tatsumakis, we did try that, and we may release some footage at some point of wired Tatsumakis, but it's not as easy as you guys think. You've got a harness on, and you've got 2 pick points either side of your waist going up to kind of a crossbar on a triangular pivot point. When you've got a harness on and you're hanging suspended from it, it's very hard to lift your leg and keep it elevated. The harness is trying to push your leg down. So that makes it difficult. To spin in a completely straight shape without listing over or leaning is also very difficult. With more money and more time, with like a swivel rig, you can have these rings that have kind of ball bearings around you. You see them on trampolines for gymnast to practice twisting somersaults and stuff. You could maybe get a smoother spinning action, but we actually worked out that just using real 540 hooks, cheat 720s, was the way to go. The only glimmer of a wired Tatsumaki you see is my fight with Gotetsu, but we'll get to that later. We spliced that in with some real Tatsumaki 720 hook that I did. And yeah, so look, that brings us to the end of episode 2. Get your questions in for episode 3, which Christian Howard will hopefully answer in a video at the start of next week. And I look forward to talking to you guys soon.